Hello, welcome to Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I am Inez E. Dickens and I represent New York City Council District 9, which includes Central Harlem, Morningside Heights, parts of the Upper West Side, and part of East Harlem. New York State and New York City's minority and women-owned businesses enterprise legislation has laid the foundation for establishing procurement goals in New York City. However, minority and women-owned businesses continue to receive a disproportionate small share of city government procurement contracts. To discuss how we can address this disparity, I'm joined today by Michael Garner, Chief Diversity Officer of the MTA, Quenia Abreu, Founder, President, and CEO of New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, and Bertha Lewis, Founder and President of the Black Institute. I want to thank all of you for being here today to discuss this important issue.
And thank you.
Thank you, Inez.
You know, the city and indeed the state has had the issue of how to have minority and women-owned contracts, MWBE contracts. The city nor the state has been very successful in achieving the goals that they themselves, that we, on both the state and the city level, have set out. Obviously, our MWBEs provide an economic stimulus to the community, and especially to the minority communities. They provide jobs, economic development, and just last year, MWBEs accounted for $1.96 billion in business in New York State. But the procurement for our communities of color remains extremely low. I'm going to ask Michael to please address what you have done, because you have been at the forefront of fighting for MWBEs, and I commend you for that. And you actually initiated a program. I'd like you to please tell us something about that program, and does it continue? Is it still relevant today?
Great, thank you. And I want to thank you for your leadership in this area in the City Council, because you understand what business is, because you and your family are business owners. And let me say that the effective leadership starts at the top. Under Governor Patterson, who focused on this, is being carried out now by Governor Andrew Cuomo, who has announced that as of April 1st of this year, not less than 30% will be awarded to MWBE firms by the 96 state agencies and the authorities in this great state. At the MTA, we are the largest state authority in the state, in this whole entire region. We spend $6 billion a year. We do everything big. We have two of the nation's largest capital construction projects going on right now. One is called Eastside Access. That's an $8.5 billion contract. The other one is a $4.6 billion. We are building out the 2nd Avenue subway line. The average subcontract on those projects are $300, $400, $500 million. There are very few, if any, MWBE firms who have the wherewithal that can work on a $300, $400, $500 million subcontract. So what we did was that we changed state law. We partnered with the Honorable L.T. Keith Wright and John Sampson in the State Senate, and our small business mentoring program was passed into law, signed into law. And what that does for us, it allows us to debundle and design prime construction projects for our M&W and DBE firms. What that means is that the average small MWBE contractor has the history of doing subcontract work. So now we are empowering them to work for the MTA directly as prime contractors. What we also did was we debundled projects up to $3 million. So now they have the opportunity to bid to us direct as prime contractors on contracts up to $3 million. Secondly, we hired Carver Federal Savings Bank. Carver issues loans to these firms up to $900,000 per contract. We waived bonding. What we did was that we created an internal bond program. So if you're bondless, we can wrap you up with our bond. And then we train you how to finish our projects safely, timely, and on budget, but also we train you how to become a better business person. And what that has done, I've been there for 6 years. When I got there at the MTA, we were awarding 6% of our contracts to state certified firms. We're now at 27%. And so we're in line with the vision of the governor, who has indicated that not less than 30% of our contracts will be awarded to New York State certified MWBE firms.
Well, Michael, MTA, under your leadership for the diversity, has really increased significantly what it has been in the past. However, that is not what has occurred in most other city agencies. I'm going to ask Quenia, can you please explain to us Local Law 1 and then Bertha? I'm going to hit Bertha.
Well, Local Law 1 is the law that mandates that the city set aside a percentage of contracting opportunities for our women and minority business owner. Local
Be
law.
careful about using that set aside.
Well, the set aside. Well, it's what it should be in reality, but it's Local Law 1 replaced what was Local Law 129, which was the beginning when we started this. And Local Law 1 now removed the cap from the previous Local Law 129, which was less than $1 million. Now there's no cap on contracting opportunities. Exactly. Which is a great thing for our women and minority business owners. But of course, there's a lot more that we can do to improve on the law, because what has happened is that even though it removed the cap, it had lowers the percentage of goals for certain groups. For instance, Latinos in construction went from an 8% goal to 4%. And then we also see the Asians that would remove in the professional area, and as also blacks, some of the areas were also lower. So what we're looking at is of course, is an increase in money, but then a decrease in goals.
Bertha, you issued a report just about a week ago, I believe, which indicated that in doing your research at the Black Institute, that you found that even though these goals had been set up, they had not actually been fulfilled. Can you please tell us a little something about what your finding was as it relates to Local Law 1 and these goals, and what you think can be done?
Well, the title of our report, and thank you for having me on the show, because this is a show that's watched widely by folks across the city. The title of the report is called Not Good Enough: The Myth of Good Faith Efforts and Best Efforts. And I say it's a myth because with all of the programs, and we do this and we do that, still to this day, in a city that is 65% people of color, the majority are minorities, only 4% of the city contracts go to MWBEs. Now this is data that comes straight out of the city controller's office. The first controller that did this was John Liu, and now we have Scott Stringer. So we haven't improved that much. So there's a myth. And the title, Not Good Enough, is sort of a double-edged sword. MWBEs, minority and women-owned businesses, they're always told, you're not good enough. You're not equipped. We can't find folks. We tried, but we can't. And what we say is, in this city, it is not good enough that the most progressive council, the most progressive mayor, and a 65% population of people of color should even entertain 4%. And when you break down that 4%, we know that Asians, Latinos, black women, and blacks, the statistics are even worse. So we're saying enough is enough. You've got to amend Local Law 1. We have to do much better. There is no one watching the store in the city. We need a full-time chief diversity officer, which Local Law 1 called for. And so we've been mobilizing, building a coalition, and we're going to fight to make sure that minority and women-owned businesses in this city, as well as in this state, get their fair share. It's not a giveaway, it's not a handout. We want to build wealth, and it is only fair. This is immoral, this is outrageous, and we're going to fight to make sure that it changes.
Thank you. Now, Quenia, do you think sole sourcing adversely impacts upon MWBE contracts?
Of course, and we are conducting a survey of the MWBEs, the city
Could you
certified.
please explain to our listening audience and our watching audience, what is sole sourcing?
Well, sole sourcing is when the city has a list of what they call preferred vendors, and the contracts are usually awarded to them because for whatever reason, this company it's giving them the best prices. I'll give you the sample of staples, for instance, when it comes to the city buying supplies, office supplies. That all of the contracts for the supplies go to Staples. So what that does, it leaves out our MWBEs, our small businesses, now lose out on that opportunity. So that's what that does for the MWBEs, which is a problem that we have and we need to address, and it has not been addressed with Local Law 1.
And sole sourcing, you don't really have to bid, is that correct?
Exactly. You don't have to bid for it. You have a list, and you can call and you can give the contract. You can award the contract to that company.
Such as in New York City Council, we get all of our office supplies.
Yes, you get all of your office supplies from Staples.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And in fact, some of the council members have in the past, I won't say in the last year, but in the last few years, several of the council members have asked to be able to buy supplies from vendors in their communities, in their districts. And we were not allowed to do that. So you're perfectly correct on that. Now, what about on the bidding? And this is for you, Michael. I'm going to ask you about the bidding process, the transparency of it. I know you've done a wonderful job at MTA at increasing significantly MWBE participation. However, for other agencies, that has not been the case. For most of the agencies, that has not been the case. Do you feel that the bidding process is transparent? And the reason I ask that is because I've known where there has been a bidding put out. It was answered by MWBEs as well as others. The MWBE in my community actually won it. And because there was no need to put out a reason why, the bid was reissued so that a bidding would be done again on the exact same contract. So can you address something about the transparency of this process?
Yes, I can speak for the MTA. So as guardians of taxpayers' funds, we are required to issue awards to the lowest responsible bidder. But the key is and what we do is that we create bid lists that have small businesses, including minority women-owned businesses, on the same bid list. Firms who have the same history of work, they bid amongst themselves, and then we make the award. So let me say that historically, government has failed in this area because we have focused all of our MWBE efforts on outreach and certification. So you meet firms, you take them through this arduous certification process, and you bring them back into the agency. But if you have not eradicated the historical barriers to entry, access to capital, access to surety bonding, the right size project, then these firms are frustrated and they can't bid. So the new paradigm is you build the program first, like we did, like the old baseball movie, Field of Dreams. You build it and they'll come. You build the programs first, and then you go out and you meet firms and you assist them in getting certified. And that certification leads to avenues for contract opportunities. And that's where you see your results are. Focusing on solutions, not focusing on problems. Too often times you hear agencies say that we want to do X, Y, and Z, but it's in violation of the state law. Change the state law. change it. Focusing on solutions and not focusing on problems.
Well, that is what I believe Bertha's report is attempting to do. I have for a number of years been discussing the possibility of doing additional amendments to Local Law 1. And Bertha, in talking about what is going on with our MWBEs and some of your recommendations, what do you think of some of the long-term viabilities of our MWBEs when you combine different measures that impact upon our small businesses, such as rent, such as prevailing wage? Let us not even get to insurances and bonding that was referred to by Mike Garner, where MTA has attempted to create an atmosphere that will allow for bonding because they do self-bonding. Other agencies do not. Can you please address some of that?
Well, a lot of what you're saying is absolutely true. One of the problems that we have, as Mr. Garner said, access to capital. Who's investing? Where are the hedge funds and the venture capitalists actually investing in MWBE companies? And also, we've got to stop thinking of MWBEs as small. They're all small businesses. One of the barriers, we've got to go with the lowest bidder. But we also know that there's sole sourcing. How do you get on that list? Maybe there should be sole sourcing for MWBEs. There's specialty. This company, they're specialized. But MWBEs are not specialists. Also, even if you get a contract, we've got to have a better way for MWBEs to be paid.
Bertha, you hit upon it.
There are payment delays, and so what we've said is, you know what? I understand Carver, the oldest African-American bank in the country. Bravo for you, but guess what? We need some bold, drastic action here. It's not working. We need an investment, and what we've called for is the 1% solution. We think that 1% of the funds that the state and the city controller controls should be put into a pool that can do two things. One, as investment. Goldman Sachs doesn't need for us to keep infusing money in there. And two, to make a bridge loan that is equally accessible and keeps revolving. But more importantly, we've got to have someone watching the store. We've got to have someone whose only job it is to make sure that this city does the right thing. Each controller has a chief diversity officer. The state has one. The governor has one. This mayor and this administration needs to have one. And then, one of the boldest things, I know earlier you said, let's be careful with that word set aside. Well, I'm not going to be careful with that word set aside. We have an emergency situation, and so we believe that there should be a mandatory 35% of contracts going to MWBEs until we get this thing straight. And it's not just in construction. Trillions of dollars are going out the door. Wall Street, we have financial MWBEs, legal MWBEs, professional services, and it's across the board. And we say, this is so serious, we have a sick patient, we need emergency surgery, 35% a CDO, and the 1% capital infusion would go a long way. And in the city council, amend local law 1 right away.
All right. Now, Quenia, and you've heard some of the suggestions that Bertha has set out, and truly the payment has become a real issue to our MWBEs, or I should say lack of payment. There's a couple of things. In Washington, there was a program, a pilot program that was initiated that allowed for a type of a credit card, if you will, where the contractors were able to pay for their supplies so their credit remained good what has happened is the payment that the city gives, even once it's approved, once they review the work and it's approved by the comptroller's office and it is put up on the computer where you can go and access and see you've been approved for payment. Sometimes it's 9 months to a year, I have found, before they get their payment. And so they become unable to pay their bills. They're unable to meet payroll. They're unable to pay for their insurances. So they're run out of business as a result. But there was a pilot program some years ago that the federal government had instituted for one or two of their programs, where you had a kind of a credit card, if you will, where they were allowed to access a certain amount of their contract to pay for their supplies. They couldn't use it to pay rent, or couldn't use it to buy clothing, but they could use it to pay for their supplies. Do you think something like that, a program like that, if it did work, would help our MWBEs in the city? And we're talking about loans to or lines of credit. There are programs now, Bertha, by the way, and you're aware of this, Mike, that gives a line of credit. It's a loan that you take out, and you pay interest on it. So it's costing you money to borrow against your money, because that's already your money. So can you address this for a minute, please?
Sure. Certainly, any program that we can come up with that would address that issue would be a great thing to do. And in terms of the credit card, if it's something that it's proven that it worked with the Fed, I don't see why we can't bring that to the city and the state of New York. And in terms of the loan, I remember the Fund for the City of New York used to lend to nonprofits at no interest when they had a contract with the city. And I have been advocating for something like that for our MWBEs. If you have a contract with the city, you know that money, the city know that
just not for profits.
no, I'm talking about exactly, because they did it for non-for-profit. But they need to do that for the MWBEs. If you have a contract with the city, you know the city knows the money's secure. They have it, right? So why not lend it to them? And then once they get paid, all the city has to do is go in, the Fund for the City of New York, is get their money, because they did that with nonprofits. So there's no reason why they can't do it with the MWBEs. And you're absolutely right. We have MWBEs that have gone out of business because their client was the City of New York, and they were not getting paid on time, and they have to close shop. And then, so what are we doing? I mean, we have this local law 1 that is supposed to help our MWBEs, but we don't have enough resources for them to succeed. So we definitely have to change
also,
that.
just quickly, in the bidding process in Washington, D.C., in order to, and they were effective in doing this, they had a kind of a point system that I thought that New York City should look at to see if it can be converted for New York City MWBEs. And they were quite successful at getting a much higher percentage of MWBEs that were qualified because of this point system. Mike, do you think something like that, are you familiar with what I'm talking about? And if so, do you think something of that nature would help? And the reason I'm concerned about that is because Port Authority is getting ready to have the airport total renovation. School Construction Authority is always at work.
Yes. So Governor Cuomo has in fact did that. There's a diversity matrix in the RFP process, which awards points to the firms that come in with the highest amount of MWB inclusion. So it's being done already. Let me remind Bertha, and she brings up a very, very great point. We're sitting in the Fortune 500 capital of the world, where billions of dollars of transactions are taking place every day. The key is how do we include MWBE firms, not only in the government sector, but in the private sector as well. And let me say this. If you take the work that we have done with your assistance at the School Construction Authority and at the MTA, those two programs are vibrant. Between those two agencies last year, we awarded over $1 billion in contracts to certified firms. Take that, because in this city, in construction, for every $1 million that's spent, a total of 26 jobs are created and or maintained, right? taxpayers' dollars, funding jobs, government, we need to be zealous on how we can eliminate barriers to include not only that our contracts should be awarded in a cost-effective manner, but in an inclusive manner as well.
And MWBEs, I just might add, MWBEs hire within their communities, which raises the economic base, which allows us to be able to pay rent, buy food, and support our families effectively.
Exactly.
And so it's important what you're saying, and it's important that what you have been able to effect at MTA should be done at all of the agencies, and it can only be done through legislation, as what is being suggested by Bertha. Would you please give a final statement on what you think can be done to effectively increase MWBE participation, not merely on construction, but across the board?
Well, one of the things, Inez, is the unbundling of the contracts, which is very important because that would allow for more participation, especially at the prime level. The other one, it's also giving priority to New York City and New York State companies, because as it is, any company from any state, from any other state can come in and still bid on contracts and get it. And so we lose opportunities for our own MWBE firms, and our tax dollars need to go to them, not outside of New York.
Well, I thank you, and I thank Michael, Quenia, and Bertha for being here today to discuss this important issue. If you have any questions or comments on this issue, or any issue that impacts our district or our city, please contact my office at 212-678-4505. I am New York City Council member Inez E. Dickens. Thank you for watching Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network.